Alright, my upperclassmen, let's finish off today's lesson with a little bit of content. Like I said in our tour video, I really want to dive into content in our next lesson, so if you haven't had a chance to watch through our tour yet, I highly recommend that you do, so you know what to expect in our classroom, so we can get right into the Englishy part of English class. We're going to finish off today with some notes on semicolons, along with a pretty small practice activity too. Semicolons are simpler, rules-wise, than commas are, so I'm hoping that you find these notes pretty easy. Following these notes and following directions carefully should lead to success on the practice as well. I want to note that semicolons will be reflected on this week's quiz. At the end of this week, once again, I'm going to give you a quiz that can replace your quiz grade from last week. I wasn't super impressed with the first batch of quizzes that I graded, and so I want to make sure I build in an opportunity to go for higher grades on that. So I just want to note that you've got 2 quizzes. Only one of those scores is going in the grade book. Whichever quiz you do better on is the score that you keep. The one that you do worse on is the one that gets scrapped. Upcoming in our next lesson, we will cover some more notes and some practice activities with sentence structure. Sentence structure really just pulls together everything we know already from commas, semicolons, and marks, those kinds of things, in order to write complete sentences, avoiding run-ons and fragments and comma splices. I'll also build in some time for our lesson to take that second grammar quiz, hopefully for a higher score from your first one. That's not going to take an entire lesson to do both of those things, so you've also got some time to work on your college application essay as well. We'll talk more about that in our next lesson because I've extended the deadline on it a bit. Let's do semicolons. So you'll notice at the bottom of our lesson folder, Semicolons Notes and Practice, an online punctuation game. We're going to look at the notes and practice first. That punctuation game is there for you to play to get extra practice if you like. We're probably going to use it in our in-person class today to help fill some of the time and get some extra practice. Please watch this video, you're watching it now, for notes on semicolon usage, then complete the practice activity. It says immediately below the notes, but you'll find it in my document here. You are being graded on both the notes and the practice, so please make sure you're following along with me and then doing the practice on your own. I'm going to open this up in Microsoft Word so it doesn't make any changes to this document. And then from there, you can finish your notes and practice too. So the reason why I don't have a PowerPoint for semicolons is that there's really only a couple of rules that govern them. And as long as you know those rules, you know how to use the semicolon. The first major use of the semicolon says use a semicolon between 2 closely related blank clauses. We should know that's either going to be independent clauses or dependent clauses. It says in exemplum, i.e., 2 sentences that could stand alone if separated by a period. We know that those are independent clauses. I'm going to pop that in there. Independent. There we go. So what the semicolon does is it allows us just to place it right between 2 closely related independent clauses. It really takes the place of a comma and a conjunction. Notice here, there is the rule that they must be closely related. So if you've got 2 independent clauses that really don't relate to each other at all, don't use a semicolon, leave those as separate sentences. Let's see this an example here. We have a sentence that says, I love the semicolon, it is my favorite punctuation mark. Notice that each of these clauses are related. There's I love the semicolon, that's a fine sentence by itself. There's it is my favorite punctuation mark, that's a good sentence by itself. They're related. And so we connect them using that semicolon in the center. There is a your turn sentence right there. I do want you to try this one, and I'll go over its answer in like 5 seconds here. Alright, so our your turn sentence says, I like chimichangas, they are delicious. I hope you know how to separate clauses. Once again, you look for the subject-verb combination, I like, and they are. This one's going to go right after chimichangas, and you can hear that pause as well. Semicolons are like commas in that they note a pause. In this case, it's a pause between 2 clauses. I like chimichangas, semicolon, they are delicious. If you're noticing here that using a semicolon is even easier than using a comma and a conjunction, you're absolutely right. Semicolons are a wonderful way to add some diversity in your writing by doing that. Really, the only sin that you can commit with that is overusing them. Having compound sentence after compound sentence after compound sentence, only using semicolons. You'll want to vary it up a little bit, but you're right, it is easier than using a comma and a conjunction. The other major rule with the semicolon is to use a semicolon between two complete sentences, linked with a blank blank. See the list below? That blank blank are conjunctive adverbs. I'm going to type that in real quick, and we'll talk about what conjunctive adverbs are. Conjunctive adverbs. And let's take a look at that list, right? You'll notice that on your conjunctive adverbs list, you've got a lot of transition words from essays. Accordingly, additionally, also, elsewhere, finally, furthermore, however. However is a super common one. In contrast, indeed, next, moreover. Moreover is one of my favorite transitions, period. Rather, otherwise, thus. These are not every conjunctive adverb in the language, but these are all the most common ones that you would possibly use. Notice that these are words that we use to note a transition, sometimes between sentences, but sometimes inside of one sentence. I'll show you how that works. We see an example. The semicolon can be used between two complete sentences. Semicolon, conjunctive adverb, they use moreover right here, and then a comma after the conjunctive adverb. That is the structure we use for conjunctive adverbs. It goes semicolon, adverb, comma, and then the rest of the sentence. It can be used between two complete sentences, linked with a transitional word such as also. Notice here, complete sentence, the semicolon can be used between two complete sentences. That's fine by itself. Moreover, this is a second sentence. It can be used between two complete sentences linked with a transitional word such as also. What we basically do there is we can replace that period between those two sentences with a semicolon, and then we just need a period, and we just need a comma after our transition word, after our conjunctive adverb. There is another your turn sentence here. In Wisconsin, most snowfall occurs in January and February. However, it has snowed in March and April before. Take another 5 seconds to do that one on your own, and then I'll go over it anyway. Alright, I hope you noticed that the process is as easy as just spotting out your conjunctive adverb. So you've got your list as a resource. You can use that for your practice as well. And then we just have to punctuate it right. Remember, semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma. And then you can read that out loud to check yourself too. In Wisconsin, most snowfall occurs in January and February. Hear that pause right there for that semicolon. However, another pause because there's a comma. It has snowed in March and April before. That is an excellent sentence. And notice that that's more interesting than having that as two different sentences in an essay. Using that conjunctive adverb really freshens up the writing and makes it more interesting. There are a couple of do-nots with semicolons. There's a few cases where you might be tempted to use a semicolon that you'll want to avoid. For one, do not use a semicolon to introduce a list. We're going to look at We're going to look at colons either next week or the following week. You use a colon to introduce a list instead of a semicolon. We do not need to use semicolons between complete sentences joined by and, nor, but, or, yet, or so, and for. I don't know why I didn't include the F in fanboys there. If you're using a coordinating conjunction between complete sentences, use a comma instead, comma conjunction. We never need to separate dependent clauses and the rest of the sentence using semicolons. Again, if you get a dependent clause first, use a comma. If your dependent clause comes second, you do not need a comma at all. No punctuation. There are 10 practice sentences here. It's a good idea to read these out loud as you follow the directions. They simply say, use semicolons and or commas to correct each of the following sentences. So as you read a sentence out loud, hockey is over, comma, now is time to focus on football. I hope you notice that that's a comma splice. Correct it either using a semicolon or with commas. I hope you know how to fix that first one. Just follow your directions and use your notes from earlier to work through these 10 sentences. I'm going to leave highlights and comments on these like I have been doing with other grammar activities. Best of luck to you as you work through this worksheet. Again, I will give you feedback before you take your next quiz.